Hello everyone, Zillarant here, and today we're going to take a look at Pamina, a breaker unit that will be coming out with the Crimson Knight expansion. She is the unit that came right after Alternate Raiwa when the CN version dropped it. And as we know from the announcement they've made that we will be getting the Crimson Knight expansion at the end of December, so it kind of tracks that she'll probably be releasing probably in some point in January. We can fully expect Alternate Raiwa to probably come first, just like CN. Now, there's always a possibility they change it up. So she may come after, say, Tristan or someone else if they decide to change things up. We'll just kind of have to see from there. Big thing is that even though she is a breaker, she does function completely different than August. She's a lot more defensive, as we'll see when we get into her skills, but she kind of uses that defense to her strength. So let's go ahead and take a look at her talent or trait. All right, when we take a look at her at 1 star here, for every enemy within 2 squares of her, her self-defense is increased by 15% up to 30%. So if you have 2 units within 2 squares of her, she'll have a 30% increase in defense. She ignores block, and her defense is increased. This one's kind of weirded word, but basically, depending on her defense increased by 10 to 20%, it's added into her physical attack value. You can just think of it as she uses her defense as an offense, so you want to buff up her defense because that is going to be applied to her ultimate attack ability. And then after entering battle, Flower of Firenesses, which is a unique skill to her, can be activated once per round. And this Fierce Flower attack is when attacked by an enemy within 2 squares of her, it'll deal 90% physical range damage. It'll hit everybody within 2 squares of her. And it gets a 45% life drain to all enemies within the range, but the damage is reduced by 10% for each additional enemy hit, up to 30%. So if there's 3 enemies, you're going to hit all 3 of them, but it's going to have 30% reduced damage to all of them. Now, if you have more than 3, it's still only going to be 3%. So you're basically wanting to maximize the amount of units within that 2 squares when that is getting triggered. And this effect cannot be dispelled or immunized. It just means you can't prevent her from having this capability. Now, when she goes up in goes up in stars, we look here. So the physical defense here at the beginning kind of stays the same there, but when you go to 2, I believe, yeah, her defense increase here is 15% being added into the attack value on the 2 stars, so nothing significant there. And then it adds an additional 1 time per round, so you can have 2 times per round and 2 stars ever she counterattacks with that AoE. On the 3 stars, that goes up to 3. And then that defense goes up by 20%. And then at 4 stars, it's 25%. And the big one, and she is going to be a unit, if you're going to use her, that you're going to want to get the 5 stars. We're starting to see this with a lot of the newer units, where 5 stars is where you're really seeing the biggest bang for your buck on the units, which is what is going to make it a lot harder in terms of maximizing those memory shard farming. But this one's the same thing, but it goes to 30%. Now it can be activated 4 times per round. So she's attacked 4 times per round, so you just throw in a bunch of enemies and she's doing those AoE attacks. She's going to be able to hit all of them 4 times. And then when it is triggered, it will also dispel 1 debuff from her and restore 1 energy. So she can get 4 energy from that counter attack. So that's a new thing that's completely added at the very end in the 5 stars. So let's go ahead and now take a look at her skills themselves. Alright, so when we take a look at her first starting skill here, Swift Combo. It's a physical damage single target attack that causes 20% damage, dispelling 2 buffs from the target, and then Chase causing 130% damage. So basically is a 150% damage attack with that Chase added on the end, and it can remove their buffs. There's nothing too crazy there. We have seen that with a lot of other units. But we're already right in the beginning when we get into her first rank skills here. Both of them are quite useful. And so the first one here is called Breaking Spear. So this one is where you get to choose between 2 attacks. So this is basically another one of those skills that has 2 abilities built into it. So it's 2 skills in 1 effectively. So when you look at the skills under it, we have Breaking the Formation, Breaking the Power. This is a physical damage that deals 50% range damage 3 times to all enemies. So it's basically 150% damage. It hits all the enemies within 1 square of the target range and then gains Shield Break 4 before attacking. If the target is in a dying state, it'll ignore 80% of its defense. So if something is in a dying state, it's effectively killing it. And the big thing here is it applies unyielding before, or negative unyielding before attacking, meaning if a unit has unyielding, they lose that capability. To me, that one is going to be huge against units like Alexi, who as soon as they get put in that state, they basically cannot die for that turn. And that attack right there will shut that completely down and will kill him in one hit. Well, not one hit, it will finish him off if he's at no health. So ultimately, that's an amazing skill in itself on that one. Then we take a look at the second one here, breaking the formation and being invincible. This is another physical damage attack that deals 110% area damage to all enemies within a 1x5 area in the target direction, and it knocks the first enemy back 2 squares. So as you can see down in the little image where you have the little square, it just attacks 5 in a line, and then the one person gets knocked back. So we can actually take a look at this in action. Okay, so when we take a look at this skill here, you'll see the first one where it attacks the AoE, it's going to hit them 3 times. Now, I don't think either of these enemies have unyielding to kind of show where it shuts it down. Just know that if they have unyielding, it's going to shut it down, so they will die on that when they actually die. So it's just going to hit them, hits all 3 attacks, and then they will die. And it's that AoE range from the attack. And then we have the second one, which is the 5 target hit. And so this one actually kind of shows it in actually a pretty useful way that you could use this. So this guy's within that first range that's going to get knocked back. This barrel's within 5. So that one doesn't get knocked back, but he does, but it's going to hit both of them. And so it's what you kind of see here is he'll hit the target, then it's going to knock him back. Now it did kill him, but let's say it didn't kill him. It knocks him back, and then now he's in range of the barrel to take the hit. Now in that case he was dead already, but if that was more difficult content, that would have been able to get some additional damage on him there. Alright, let's take a look at the other rank 1 skill, and this is one that you'll want to use a Castelia on if you have her, because you're going to want both of these first level skills. So this one we're actually going to have to go into the skill to look at it more in depth, because it has a couple extra things involved in it. So the first thing is it has inflicts being ridiculed to the targeted enemy within the range, which is a range of 3. So this is effectively a taunt that increases the enemy's speed by 100, so they'll actually be faster. But they cannot be controlled by the player. So if you're doing PvP, the AI takes over for it. But when if you're playing on a PvE, it's still the AI, but it's going to change the behavior how they act. And so the target will attack the caster with normal attacks. So it's basically going to force the enemy to basically suicide, go towards Pamina, and then they're going to attack her. And it's only going to use their basic normal attack when they attack her. And then alongside that, this restores 30% of her own health. She gains parry, which parry is the state for being attacked by a melee physical attack. She turns towards the target and add 20% of your own physical attack to physical defense. So you're pretty much going to always have her looking at the enemy. They're not going to be able to back attack or hit her on the side. So they'll come up to her, they get that, and then it gives you an additional physical defense. She also gets damage reduction. 2 for that, which reduces damage taken by 20%. This lasts for 2 rounds, and then all friendly troops within 4 squares of the range gets defense 2. That lasts for 2 rounds. If the target is immune to her initial taunt, then they will instead be inflicted with Pamina's challenge, which they cannot be immune from. And this is a debuff that when attacked by the caster, the damage take is increased by 30%. So it just makes it where now she does more damage to them if they're immune to her taunt. And that lasts for 2 rounds. So right now, this is probably what I would consider the better rank 1 skill of the 2. So if you're only going to take one, this is definitely the one I'd probably take, just because when we get into our other skills, you're going to kind of see how it really plays really well, some of the other stuff. But this is I would highly want to put in the Castelia to get the one on the left as well, because it's extremely useful as well. So we take a look at the skill. You're going to see her get that little heal right off at the beginning. She's going to put out the AoE. She is taunting this guy directly in front of her. And so he's taunted on her, and then you're going to see him come up, attack her from the front. And it does show that you're putting a taunt, because it's going to put an exclamation point above their head. And then he's going to come to attack. It's going to force him to attack her directly. It only can use a basic attack. And while she is looking at him in this case, if she was not looking at him, it would turn her towards him to look at it. And then she attacks back with her counterattack there. And as you saw, there was another enemy right there, so she attacked them as well. All right, when we take a look at her rank 3 skills here, we have Chop, which is a passive. After actively attacking, causes 20% physical damage to all enemies within one circle of your range. So it's basically, when it says circle, it's that the whole square around you, so it includes the corners as well. So nothing really crazy there. That's just an additional damage that can be done to enemies in a little AoE range around her. It's a nice little passive. But when you get over to the right side, rank 3 skill, it's a passive, reduces damage received by 15%. If it's an area attack, 15% of your own physical defense and magic defense is added onto your physical attack value. So that's just another way that you're using your defense to stack your attack, just like her trait. So it's another little good passive there. The one thing you're kind of going to start seeing with her is you can actually build her, even though she's a breaker, she can work very well as kind of her own tank. And then you're throwing out there, and then you have the other defenders coming in, and she's just going to wreck them with her counterattacks. So when we get to her rank 5 skills, it's not as obvious to me on which one of the reactions you're going to want, because they're both going to have their use depending on how you're going to use her. So the first one here is Righteousness. This is a reaction that increases healing received by 15%. At the start of action, she will dispel 3 debuffs on herself. If she has no debuffs, she'll increase her health by 20%. So this one's going to make it a lot easier to keep her alive through heals, as well as make it where she basically is going to have no debuffs on her, because 3 debuffs is quite a bit. I don't know how many, if there's going to be anything in the future where they're just stacking even more than 3, but just being able to keep those off of her is going to be really nice on the tankiness of her. But then when we come over to the one on the right, this one we've seen in other units, but it actually shows a lot of value with her if you pair it kind of with her other skill there, and this is Frontal Defense. When attacked from the front, damage received is reduced by 30%. What's really big with that one is you have a skill where she's going to turn towards the enemy if she taunts them, so they will attack her from the front. Now, they're only going to do a basic attack, so it will be a weaker attack when they do that. And it only does that if they're not immune to that taunt. So for that, on the reactions, I probably would take the left one over the one on the right, because this one seems like it's not going to be as valuable when it comes to taking a hit from like a enemy that's immune, which is going to be your bosses, which are going to be your hardest hitters. So this is going to save her more from fodder enemies, which she already should be tanky enough to deal with. But I don't 100% know on that. We'll kind of have to see with Tower Adversity, which we should have by the time she comes out. Overall, I would say take the left one on this one, but this one probably could go either way. Now, when we take a look at the level 7 skills, we have on the left here, Shield Breaker. This one deals 60% area damage to the first enemy in each column of a 3x2. So we've seen this like with Simona, where she has her 3x2 attack where it hits the first one within that 3x2 area. So hit them, it'll apply physical defense down for 2 turns on them and knock them back 2 squares. It's extremely similar to hers, except hers adds that debuff rather than adding the ice. But then when we go over to her one on the right, this is basically her ultimate of her kit, Breakthrough Invincible. So this is a physical damage one that jumps to the target location. And as you can see down in the bottom left on the skill, it has quite a large range, a range of 2 to 4. Now this one does have a long cooldown of 4 turns, and it costs 3 energy. But she'll jump to their spot, deals 70% area damage to all enemies within 2 squares of the target. She applies Satire, and if we actually look in the skill what Satire is, it's just that taunt. So she will taunt all of the enemies when in that area. Then she'll put Vulnerable 2 on them, and this lasts for 1 round. And after attacking, she'll gain Breakthrough, which is a buff that reduces the damage and penetration damage by 30%. She possesses Unyielding, so if they kill her, she's going to come back from. She's not going to die. She'll stay alive, and this can offset 1 fatal. Offsets 1 fatal damage, so she can't die, and that can't be dispelled. And then if the target is immune to that, it's the same thing where it puts it where she does more damage to them. This one is going to be the must pick of this group because this is going to be extremely good and pairs extremely well with her trait in being able to jump into an area that's got a ton of enemies in it, getting them all to target her, and then she can just wreck all of them. When we take a look at this skill, it is kind of hard to see it in action. It does show it in a couple different scenarios here, so you can just kind of see it in how it works. It's got the nice ultimate animation alongside it. She jumps to the area. You can kind of see it with, so she just jumped in an area of 3 enemies here. Now, it's killed this guy, but as you can see, this guy's been taunted and this guy's been taunted. And so if they want to target her, they're going to come up to her to hit her, and they're only going to be able to do basic attacks when they hit her. And then, as you know, with her trait, she's going to be able to do that AoE attack back. So in this scenario, she's going to kill both of those guys pretty easily when they come back to attack her. Which actually it shows right here. He came back in, attacked her, and she countered back and killed him. So here's one where she just hit like 5 enemies with one time at that turn. So that one is going to be extremely good for her, and it's actually going to be extremely good for killing fodder enemies, because as we know, that taunt's most likely not going to work on most bosses. But one of the big things that I've struggled with sometimes on these towers and more difficult content is not actually the bosses, it's just all those little enemies around them that can do still significant damage. Now we get to her rank 9 skills. This one I think is a pretty easy choice. If we look one on the left, this is Breaking Lightning. This is a normal attack that deals 100% physical damage and applies the inability to dodge to the target for 1 round. So it shuts down dodge. Or you can have the Power Strike, which does 110% damage. So this one, it's you either want the extra 10% damage, or do you want something where you can actually apply something to a debuff to the enemy, which is the preventing dodge. I feel like that's going to be way more useful, because it'll kind of be niche, because you're not going to need it that often, and a lot of the enemies that are going to use dodge are actually going to be Seekers, which you don't want her around Seekers because she's a breaker. But it might have its situational uses, and the extra 10% to me doesn't seem like it's going to be enough to really warrant taking the one on the right. So I think that one's a fairly easy choice there, and hopefully you're not really even having to use your basic attack much, because a lot of her stuff is kind of built into her counter-attacking anyway. So when we go to her 11th skills, we have on the left counter-attack, gain retaliate, and counter-attack for 2 turns. So this is just another way to have her attack back on enemies. Now she's already kind of got that built into her trait and a lot of her AoE stuff. So I don't really see this one being as useful. It may be the choice for her, because I don't know if this will kind of stack with her trait in that capacity where you can have both her trait attack back as well as this, and so you're getting a lot of hits on the enemy. If that's the case, this may be the one to go with. Because the one on the right is just a passive speed increase of 50, and when she's in the healthy state, the damage taken is reduced by 20%. And so we already know she has life drain built into her trait, and she has a lot of stuff to make her kind of attack back, so I feel like she could be in the healthy state more often. So that's just another way that you could make it where she's just really, really tanky. But when it comes to building her, I don't think I would use either of these, just because there's so many other good skills below. Alright, when it comes to her weapon, Pamina's going to want her signature weapon. It's called the Legion Breaker. We'll be getting it coming out with Tristan's, and it looks like Layla's signature trinkets here as well. So this is the Legion Breaker. It increases critical hit rate and attack by 10%. Before attacking, if the total distance moved, charged, or teleported, and that's key with the teleported, because that's kind of where her jump skill is, where she'll jump to the enemies. If it's greater than 5, critical damage is increased by 10%. Additionally, after using a non-instant skill, and I'm pretty sure all of her skills are not instants, so pretty much it's always going to trigger this. The skill cooldown is reset, so she can use that skill again. So her ultimate attack, she can use that skill again immediately on her next turn. And the consumed energy is refunded, so you basically can do that ultimate twice in a row, which is going to be huge for her. But this has a cooldown of 3 turns, so you can't just keep doing that over and over. But that one ultimate skill is going to be very good for clearing fodder, and if you can just do that 2 rounds in a row, you're going to jump in, hit all the enemies around her, and then maybe you can jump into another area with a bunch of enemies and kill all of them. So I see her being very, very good at clearing fodder enemies because of all of her AoE attacks. So that's going to be your best weapon. If you don't get the signature weapon, then when we kind of look at the other weapon choices for her, the 2 big that come to mind for me is Silent Guard. When actively attacked, so if someone is attacking her, defense increases by Her defense increases by 30%, and the next attack deals 25% more damage. As you know, she has a lot of counterattack in her skills, and she actually can apply that defense to her attack, so it increases her attack. So that's going to be very, very good on her. If for some reason you don't have one of these by that point, which I think now that everybody should be having the weapon trials kind of finished, I think pretty much every weapon, everybody should have at least one copy of every weapon at this point. I feel like I have tons of like all the weapons, so... But if you don't have that, maybe double-sided halberd will be the next best here. Increases the physical attack by 5%, and for each target hit when attacking, it'll increase the damage by 8% up to 24%. So those are kind of the three weapons you're going to want to get there. When it comes to the trinkets, it's kind of this. To me, it's always the same ones for every main DPS type, which is going to be that armlet that has the percentage damage or that fire ring. And that is Pamina and her kit. I think she's going to be very good. I definitely don't think she is as good as, say, Alternate Raiwa, who we should be seeing coming out around the same time, as they're both basically released with the Crimson Knight patches, or the Crimson Knight DLC. So we'll kind of have to see on that capacity. I think she will rely probably heavily on her signature weapon to kind of really min-max her skills. And the big reason being that her alt is a 4-turn cooldown, and her signature weapon basically makes it where you can use it twice in a row before you have to wait that cooldown. And the big thing with it is it's a fodder clearing skill, meaning she jumps into a bunch of those enemies. They all come and attack her because she taunted all of them, and then she can clear them all out with her AoE. And then you have your big damage DPS come in to help with clearing out the main boss of Tower Adversity or whatever content you're doing. So her signature weapon is really going to be key, just because being able to do this twice in a row. She'll still be good without it. I just think what really makes her go above and beyond will be the signature weapon. And it's just going to depend on preference to me, realistically. Because we'll probably have Alternate Raiwa, Pamina, and Tristan come out back to back to back. I don't know the order. They might change up the order. So you'll kind of want to make probably your decision on which one of those three you're going to want to get. Because I probably wouldn't get all three, try and go over all three of them. You really only need one of them because they all are in the similar vein, big AoE burst type damage users. But I really do like her kit. It just takes a lot more investment, I feel like, than some of the others. But to end the video, if you like my content, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. I'm going to continue doing these videos until I get to the last current released unit in sort of Convallaria, and then at that point, I'll just kind of keep up with them as they come out. But yeah, thanks for watching.